Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week, and if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment down below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. Today's tutorial is a quick one. We're making almond stitch arm warmers, the perfect addition to a date night fit or a textured personal touch. Speaking of, by now y'all already know the drill, but just in case you're new. All new date-worthy crochet tutorials and patterns are here with even more dropping twice weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now, it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category for yarn will work, but I use a total of 90 grams of yarn, that's 200 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 5mm hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order. Enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us if you want to try new food, do you make it at home, or do you go to a restaurant? We typically try to make it at home. It's like a fun little adventure. Details for the giveaway down below. We're using 3 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, and half double crochet. This tutorial is made for a size small. You can adjust it for your size, and I'll explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting these arm warmers started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Then we're all going to grab our 5mm hook and start off by making a chain that is in multiples of 8, the length that we'd like for our arm warmers to be. So I'm going to measure from the base of my thumb down to about mid-forearm. Now I need roughly 9 inches or 23 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 40. And I actually already have this portion of my piece already completed, so I'm just going to be doing a small sample size with you. Now that we have our chain, we are all going to do an additional 4 chains for everyone, and that's no matter what size we're making. So block off that last chain and start with 1, 2, 3, 4. That additional 4 chains counts as our base chain. Now we're all going to get started on our row 1. So start by blocking off that last chain and chain 1. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's a turning chain. Now we're all going to do a set of 4 slip stitches. So into that chain that we blocked off, or into that second chain from our hook, bring your hook down into that chain. When we have these 2 loops on our hook, yarn over and pull through both loops. We want to make sure that we're not pulling through too tightly, otherwise the falling rows could be too tight to work into. There's 1 slip stitch into the next. We're going to insert, yarn over, and gently pull through both loops. That's our second. We need 4. So into the next with a third, and into the next with our 4th. Now that we have our 4 slip stitches, we're all going to do 4 half double crochets. So starting with the yarn over, into that next chain, insert with 1 half double crochet, into that next chain with our second, next chain with our third, and next chain with our 4th. From here, what we're going to do is continue to do our 4 slip stitches, 4 half doubles to reach the end of the row. Everyone's last set of stitches should be 4 slip stitches, then I'll meet you back to get started on row 2. We are back and our row 1 is complete. Now we're all going to get started on our row 2, but just as a really quick tip, for every even number row for this portion is going to be a repeat of our previous odd number row. So if we're looking at our previous stitches, it ends with slip stitches, so our row 2 is going to start with 4 back loop slips, 4 back loop half doubles, and continue to repeat all the way down. So from where we're at, we're all going to chain 1 and flip. And like I said, we're all going to start with 4 back loop slip stitches. So we're going to find that last stitch from our previous row. Insert your hook into that back loop or the loop that's furthest away from us, yarn over, and gently pull through everything on our hook. Again, we need a total of 4, so into that next stitch is back loop, yarn over, gently pull through everything. Again, next stitch is back loop, yarn over, gently pull through everything, and once more to get a total of 4 stitches. my 4th back loop slip stitch. Now we're going to do 4 back loop halves. So yarn over into that next stitch's back loop, insert with 1 back loop half, there's our first, into that next with our second, yarn over into that next with our third, then yarn over into that next with our 4th. And from here, we're going to continue to do 4 back loop slips, 4 back loop halves to reach the end of the row. We are back and we have just completed our row 2. Now this is a 4-row repeat, so let's get started on a row 3. Every odd number row is going to be the opposite from what our previous row stitches look like. So just to talk you guys through it, since the last set of stitches was slip stitches, when we chain 2 and flip, the following 4 stitches is going to be 4 back loop halves, 4 back loop slips, and continue doing that, making our way all the way down. So from where we're at, we're all going to chain 2 and flip. Now for our row 3, we're all going to get started with 4 back loop halves. So yarn over into that first stitch's back loop with our first, our second back loop half, our third back loop half, and then also our 4th. Once we have our first 4 half double crochets completed, then we're going to do 4 back loop slip stitches. So into that next stitch's back loop with 1, next with our second, next with our third, next with our 4th back loop slip. From here, continue to repeat our 4 back loop half, 4 back loop slip to reach the end of the row. The last set of stitches for this row should be 4 back loop halves because we started with 4 back loop halves. We are back and our row 3 is completed. Now, since it is a 4-row repeat, we're going to chain 2 and flip. And like I said, for every even number row, it is going to be a repeat of what our previous row stitches look like. So once we flip our work, it's going to look like 4 back loop halves, 4 back loop slips. So we're going to start with 4 back loop halves, 4 back loop slips. So we're all going to chain 2 and flip. So getting started on a row 4, we're all going to yarn over and insert with our first back loop half. Into that next with our second, next with our third, next with our 4th back loop half. Then the next set of stitches look like back loop slip, so I'll be doing 4 back loop slips. So there's my first, my second, third, and 4th. From here, just continue with our 4 back loop halves, 4 back loop slips to reach the end of the row. We are back and our first 4 rows are complete. Now what we're going to do from here is continue to repeat our 4 previous rows, making sure that all the rows are within the back loops until we now have a portion that can wrap around our wrist. Now keeping in mind that it will have a decent amount of stretch to it, but once we have this portion completed, keeping in mind that the amount of rows that we need must end in multiples of 4, then I'll meet you back so we can seam it up together. So we are back. I have just completed the width of my arm warmers. I have a total of 24 rows. This width is just about 6 inches or 15 centimeters that is unstretched. Now from here, we're going to seam up the wrist portion. So what we're going to do is put this piece on. So we're all going to make sure that the working yarn is right at the base of our thumb. Then from here, we're going to pinch everything together, and we're just going to pinch all the way up until it gets a little bit too tight for us to pinch anymore. Then from here, we're going to insert our stitch marker. Now the placement of our stitch marker, counting from the top end, so not where the working yarn is, the amount of stitches that we have must be in multiples of 8. Now counting from the end, I've inserted my stitch marker into the 32nd stitch from the top. That's just about 6 inches or 15 centimeters. Now from here, we're going to seam up the bottom portion. So we're going to fold our work in half, making sure that the bottom is flipped outwards. Now for the almond stitch, it does have a front and a back. The front looks like it has these little pockets. The back has these little bulges. We want to make sure that we're looking at the bulgy side. Then we're going to insert our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel and pull through. From here, we're going to do a single crochet seam until we reach our stitch marker. So we're all going to do a chain up of 1 just to secure. Then finding that first stitch into the front panel, we're going to insert. Next stitch into the back panel, insert, and single crochet everything together. Again, next stitch into the front, next stitch into the back, and single crochet everything together again, and that's it. From here, we're just going to continue doing this, making our way all the way up until we're worked into the stitch right before our stitch marker. Then do a chain up one and cut, then I'll meet you back. So we are back. We have just completed seaming up the wrist portion. Now from here, we're going to work on the fill-in forearm portion. So what we're going to do is make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up. Then insert our hook into the slip stitch end of our corner, and then we're going to fill in our rows. Now when it comes to the top corners, we are going to have two. One corner, the tail end corner, is going to be slip stitches along the edge, and the other one is going to be half doubles. So into the tail end, go ahead and insert your hook into that top corner stitch. We're going to start by inserting our yarn onto our hook. We're going to pull through and start with a chain 2. Now that chain 2 doesn't actually count as a stitch, we just want the height. Then from here, 4 back loop halves, 4 back loop slips. So yarn over into that first stitch's back loop with 1 back loop half, into that next stitch's back loop with a second, next stitch's back loop with a third, next stitch's back loop with a fourth. From here, 4 back loop slips, then just continue to repeat our 4 back loop halves, 4 back loop slips until we all have 4 stitches left right before our seam. Then I'll meet you back. So we've just made our way all the way down with our 4 back loop halves, 4 back loop slips, leaving 4 stitches before our calf seam. Now what we're going to do from here is 1 back loop slip, then a decrease of 3. So the last set of stitches that we all should have done should have been 4 back loop halves. What we're going to do from here, into that fourth to last stitch, we're going to insert with 1 back loop slip, then into the last 3, a decrease of 3 back loop slips. So into that third to last stitch, pull through, second to last, pull through, and last, once we have these 4 loops on our hook, yarn over and pull through all 4 of these loops. We're then going to insert a stitch marker into the top of this stitch because this is the middle of one side. Then working on the other side of our seam, we're going to start with a decrease as well. Now working our way up this side, we're going to start with a decrease of 3 back loop halves. Starting with the yarn over into that first available stitch's back loop, and that first available stitch is on the other side of our seam. We're going to insert, pull through, next stitch's back loop, pull through, next stitch's back loop, pull through for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook. Then yarn over and pull through all 5 of those loops, and make sure you insert a stitch marker into that stitch as well. Once when that decrease is completed, we're all going to do 1 additional half double crochet. Then from here, we're going to do 4 back loop slips, 4 back loop halves, making our way all the way down to reach the end of the row. Then I'll meet you back. Now our first fill-in row is completed. Now to get started on the following row, we're all going to chain 1 and flip. Start with 4 back loop slips, 4 back loop halves, making our way all the way down, leaving 3 stitches right before our following stitch marker stitch. Then I'll meet you back. We made our way down with our second fill-in row, leaving 3 stitches before our stitch marker stitch. Now from here, we're going to do 1 back loop slip, then a decrease of 3. So the last set of stitches that we all should have done should have been 2 back loop slips. So into that next stitch, insert with 1 back loop slip, then into the next, the following, and into the stitch marker stitch, a decrease of 3 back loop slips. So into that third to last, pull through, second to last, pull through, and into that last, which should be our stitch marker stitch. I did take mine out. We're going to yarn over and pull through everything on our hook. Don't forget to insert your stitch marker into the top of that stitch. Then we're going to work our way up the other side, and we're going to start with a decrease of 3 back loop halves. Starting with the yarn over, we're going to insert our hook into that next available stitch, which should be our stitch marker stitch. I did take mine out. We're going to insert, pull through, into that next stitch, pull through, and into that next stitch's back loop, pull through for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook. Then yarn over, pull through all 5 of those loops. Don't forget to insert your stitch marker into the top of that decrease. Then working our way up, we're going to start with 3 back loop half double crochets. So yarn over into that next stitch's back loop with 1, next stitch's back loop with 2, and next stitch's back loop with our third. From here, continue with the rest of our row, starting with 4 back loop slips, 4 back loop halves to reach the end of the row. We are back and we have just completed our second fill-in row. Now we should have 4 less stitches than our first fill-in row. Now we're going to do our third. So from where we're at, we're all going to chain 1, flip our work. Start with 4 back loop slips, 4 back loop halves, making our way all the way down until we have 3 stitches right before our first stitch marker stitch again. So we've made our way down with our third fill-in row, and we have left 3 stitches right before our first stitch marker stitch. The last set of stitches we all should have done should have been 4 back loop halves. So just like our previous rows, we're going to do 1 back loop slip, then a decrease of 3 back loop slip. Now that we have completed our 1 back loop slip, then our decrease of 3 back loop slip, we do want to make sure that we're inserting a stitch marker into the top of that decrease stitch. Then working our way up the other side, we're going to start with a decrease of 3 back loop halves. Now that we have our decrease of 3 back loop halves, make sure you insert your stitch marker into the top of that stitch. Then we're all going to do just 1 back loop half, then continue working our way up the row, starting with 4 back loop slip, 4 back loop halves, making our way all the way up. We are back and our third fill-in row is complete. Now to get started on our fourth. What we're all going to do is chain 2, flip our work. Start with 4 back loop halves, 4 back loop slips, making our way down till we have 3 stitches left before our first stitch marker stitch. We've made our way down with our row 4, leaving 3 stitches right before our first stitch marker stitch. Now what we're going to do is 1 back loop slip, then a decrease of 3 back loop slip. Now our 1 slip stitch and decrease of 3 back loop slips are complete. Don't forget to insert your stitch marker into the top of that decrease stitch, and working our way up the other side, we're going to start with a decrease of 3 back loop halves. And now that our decrease of 3 back loop halves is completed, we're now going to do 3 back loop halves into the following 3 stitches. Then once we have that, complete the row with 4 back loop slips, 4 back loop halves to reach the end of the row. So we are back. We have just completed our fourth fill-in row. Now from here, we're just going to continue to repeat our 4 previous rows until we now have a portion that can wrap around our forearm. Now that's going to be completely up to you, but once we have the amount of rows that we need, we're going to seam it up. Now after my 4 rows that we just did together, that's actually the width that I need. So now we're just going to do the same seam that we did for the wrist. So just to talk you guys through it, we're going to flip our work wrong side out, then do our same single crochet seam. Then once we don't have any more stitches left to work into, do a chain up a 1 and cut, then I'll meet you guys back. So we are back. We have just completed seaming up the forearm. Now from here, we're going to get started on the top band, and the top band is going to be the one on the forearm side. So what we're going to do is make sure that our work is flipped right side out. Insert your hook into any one of the side rows that we have along the top of our piece. Then we're going to do a single crochet row. All we're going to do is 1 single crochet into every side slip stitch row, 2 single crochet into the first side half double crochet row, and then 1 single crochet into the second side half double crochet row. So let's get that started. We're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and do a chain up of 1 to secure. Now my first 2 side rows are side half double crochet rows. If yours aren't side half double, that's completely fine as well. But what we're going to do into our first side half double crochet is always insert with 2 single crochets. So into that top loop, I'm going to insert with 1, same top loop with a second. Then into my second side half, I'm going to insert with just 1. Now, my following 2 side rows is 1, 2 side slip stitch rows. So I'm going to find that top loop of my following side slip and insert with 1. Following top loop, insert with just 1 single. Then my following 2 side rows is 2 half doubles. So into that first half double, we're going to insert with 2 singles. There's 1. Same top loop with a second. Then into that second side half, insert into that top with just 1. We're going to continue on doing our single crochet row, making our way all the way around. So now that we've made our way all the way around with our single crochet row and have slip stitched into that chain space, we're now all going to make a chain the length that we'd like for this top band to be. I'd like for mine to be just about 1 inch or 2 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 6. Now that we have our chain, we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then from here, into that chain that we blocked off, the second chain from our hook, we are going to insert with a slip stitch. So insert and pull through everything. Again, into that next chain, we're going to insert, yarn over, and pull through everything, and continue with 1 slip stitch into every chain. So I've just made our way down with our row 1. Now we're going to connect it into the base. So into that first stitch into the base, we're going to insert with a slip stitch. Now that slip stitch doesn't actually count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then from here we're going to slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, that's just to work our way up to the following row. Still doesn't count as a stitch, and flip our work. From here we're all going to put one back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So finding that first available stitch, making sure that we're not working into any of those slip stitches into the base, we're going to insert into that back loop, then yarn over and pull through everything. And from here, continue with one back loop slip stitch into every stitch. At the end of the row, then we're going to chain 1, flip our work, and put one back loop slip stitch into every stitch again. Then I'll meet you back at the end of our row 3. We are back and our first 3 rows are completed. Now we're going to connect it into the base. So just finding that next available stitch into the base, insert with a slip stitch. That slip stitch doesn't actually count as a stitch. Then, just to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next available stitch. So pretty much the same way that we did the previous rows, and from here, repeat. Continue to repeat these 2 previous rows until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, I'll meet you back so we can seam it all together. So we have made our way all the way around with our bottom band, so our back loop slip stitch rows. Now we're going to seam it. Now this seam is going to be an outside loop slip stitch seam. So what we're going to do is making sure that our work is still flipped right side out. We're going to insert our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel, yarn over, pull through everything. Then from here we're all going to chain 1. Finding that first stitch into the front panel, we're going to insert only in through that front loop. First stitch into the back panel, insert only in through that back loop. Then yarn over and pull through everything on our hook. Again, next stitch into the front panel, insert only in through that front loop. Next stitch into the back panel, insert only in through that back loop. Then yarn over, pull through everything, and that's it. We're going to continue doing this till we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up 1 and cut. So now that we have seamed up the top band, we're ready to get started on the bottom band, and that's going to be done pretty much the same way as the top. So first things first, we are going to want to make sure that our work is flipped right side out. Then into the bottom, so where the wrist is going to be, we're going to insert our hook into the side row that's nearest to our wrist seam. We want to make sure that it's nearest to our seam for our thumb hole. Then we're going to do our single crochet row. So work the same way that the top band is worked. We're going to be putting 1 single crochet into every side slip stitch row, 2 single crochet into the first side half double crochet row, and then back to 1 single crochet into the second side half double crochet row. Go ahead and do that, making our way all the way around, then I'll meet you back. So I've just made my way all the way around with my single crochet row. Now from here, we're going to do the same slip stitch band that we did for the top band. Now for the sizing, we do want to make sure that we're making this long enough because the thumb hole is going to be within the slip stitch band. So what we're going to do is try our piece on, and we're going to make sure that the single crochet row that we just did is right at the base of our thumb. Then we're going to make a chain for the length of the band that we need, making sure that it's longer than the height of our thumb. Now I went ahead and already measured mine out. I need roughly 2 inches or 5 centimeters. So I'm going to start by making chain 10, then just make our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch rows, same exact way that we did the top band. No increases, no decreases. Then I'll meet you back so that we can do the seam, and that's going to be where the thumb hole lays. Alright, so we are back. We've made our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch rows. Now we're going to seam it up the same way that we did the top band, but we are not quite going to make it all the way down because we want to leave a little gap for our thumb. So what we're going to do, if we end it along the outer edge, make sure that our work is still flipped right side out, right side up, and insert your hook into the outer corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. If you guys did end along the base, do a chain up 1 and cut, then reinsert your hook into the outer corners of both the front and the back. Then we're going to do the same outside loop slip stitch seam. Now we do want to make sure that we're inserting a stitch marker into the stitch that we have. Now we do want to insert our stitch marker into the stitch that is right above our thumb once we have it on. So trying this on, making sure that the single crochet row stays at the base of our thumb, we're just going to insert our stitch marker into the stitch that's nearest to the top of our thumb. For those of you that have my numbers, I inserted my stitch marker into the 4th stitch from the top. So I'm just going to do my outside loop slip stitch seam until I reach my stitch marker. Then once I have that, I will do a chain up of 1 and cut. So we are back. We have just completed seaming up the thumb hole and we are all done. We're going to be making a second one that is exactly the same. Then we will be all done. The last thing we have to do right after that is simply weave in all of our ends. And there you have it, y'all. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch you on the next one. Bye.